So basically, my idea is this. Okay, so what if Disney decided to, or other massive studios, because of their lacking, you know, digital successes in movies lately, they decided to create the equivalent of the military-industrial complex, but with pixel gypsies. So pixel gypsies are the animator industry. They're people who get a contract from a big studio, and it's a lot of money, and they have to work very, very, very heavy hours. And then because the director of whatever project contracted them is inept in dealing with CG stuff, they end up having to do multiple scenes extra on what they thought was a contract for a specific amount of time. So they basically lock themselves into this contract where they have to be the lowest common denominator, where they have to hit a specific target in terms of their salaries. It's still a lot of money if it were like a realistically legitimate movie, but they have to really, 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 really work extra. And because you have to step after step after step actually animate what you're doing, and because the director thinks that CG is magic and the studio already thinks that CG is easy to do, people end up overworking themselves to an extreme, and their work never gets finished because of stupid deadlines and constant reshoots and constant re-edits and the erasure of certain things like rain in a certain scene, or the addition of certain things like rain in a certain scene. And this has been like a topic of discussion since like the early teens. This is before the whole woke-mageddon situation of the mid-teens. This is pre-Me Too, whatever. Firstly, would anyone actually sign up for like a system where a big corporation buys individual buildings in every state and hires people? Because, like, they know exactly how exploitative these companies are. Why would they think that these companies would be in any way, shape, or form, like, a good boss at all? Like, it's ridiculous. They know about Imagineers getting paid, like, pennies for, like, massive amounts of work. They know this is stupid. And they know about the politics inside and all the political movements and maneuverings and whatever. Then there's the question, how would the crew work? Like, would you have some of the animators working from home? Would you have, like, people from one state telling people from another state, I want this and that and blah, blah, blah? Would there be like a constant exchange of information? Would there be like a frequent meeting to discuss what needs to be done? Color palette additions? Because you would have to functionally do remote work even if you're not doing remote work, because all the individual cells of animators would have to be interacting constantly. And that interaction and the meetings, like, you know, the constant meetings that middle managers like to have, would actually slow them down even further. So you'd effectively be paying more money for less work. You could get, like, decent enough, you could get cheap salaries by focusing on low-income neighborhoods where you set your thing up. But then if you go too low income per state, you run the risk of having your scenes stolen before they show up, so someone could leak them and get pissed off at you. And if you go too high end, like, well, the same thing, because, you know, you could be hiring snobby people who don't fucking understand what they're doing, and you could very easily get into a Nepo baby situation right there with animators. But, like, there's no possible way that you could legitimately win with this sort of thing. Like, maybe you can have not a military industrial complex style approach, but a single state or key state approach to setting up your animators, which would give you like a coherent like workplace environment focusing on specific things. But then you'd have to pay absurd salaries for work that you can have done in Japan for cheap. But if you do that in Japan or Korea, well then you have tariffs to deal with. Like even with the tariffs, it still could be cheaper. Right. So then you're stuck with these Americans. And the American animation industry, like, the quality of animation in the last decade plus has substantially dropped. Like, substantially dropped because of the economic efficiency issue. Right? There's no way you're gonna get another Teen Titans Go, another Teen Titans Pre-Go style show. Like, maybe once in a while you get like an extra season to Samurai Jack or like a specific animated movie, and AI could certainly help with some of the work, but then you have the politicking with AI, and AI is just mathematical chemistry on this GPU farm somewhere that just is positioned in the exact wrong spot where it should be positioned because it's positioned close to people, because the idea with data centers is that you have quick access, so you have low latency, but that's pretty stupid because people are just sending out text prompts and getting text in return, so there's really no need to get overly obsessed with latency. Like, it just doesn't make any sense, Like, you can literally shave off that latency by having a slightly faster microphone, or like using retro connectors. Like, maybe what would it be? Like 2 milliseconds? Like an extra millisecond here and there? Like, you can literally use those. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Yeah, so the whole reason that like big companies would try to create a military industrial complex style distribution of pixel gypsies, of animators in America, would be to have total political support from every single state, like the military industrial complex had in the early 2000s. But then, as soon as you do that, people will cry foul because you're essentially just zeroing in on setting up propaganda. Yeah, literally, you would be just setting up propaganda. Like, for actual, like because of the nature of big corporations and because of the last couple of years, people would absolutely think that, Disney is just setting up propaganda, like a propaganda network. And people would call it out, and people would call out, to an extra extent, the lack of quality because of the obvious issues with spending money on animation from the US instead of spending a lot less money on animation from the rest of the world. So there's really, I just cannot, even if you have specific buildings with animators, all those problems are still there, right? Like I just don't see a future for where corporations can really win when it comes to animation, right? Animators, like, it is a lowest common denominator type situation, right? Because everybody can animate now. So the main question is, what is the specific style? In which case, those aren't animators that you need to focus on. You need to focus on distinct artists. So the art style would have to be the best. Now, you could find more dynamic animations, and maybe eventually one day, people could have animators using current era computers, creating animations like cartoons back in the 90s and whatever, and that could somehow get monetization, in which case corporations would buy off those animators. But I really don't see any sort of hint of like small scale, super creative animators. Like it is a very, very, very niche thing to animate a movie. I mean, I suppose Love, Death, Robot has created a marketplace where you can just make individual episodes, and that's a possible route for monetization. But even with Love, Death, Robot, that's a very small number of people working for a streaming service. So there's a very small niche group of people who are like obsessed with that. You can get something akin to Love, Death, Robot with much, much more edgy humor, but minus the super animation, like cardboard cutout level, like not even Toonami, early 2000s Toonami level animation, like quick snippet jokes everywhere. Like literally everywhere, both from anime websites and in the depths of YouTube and TikTok. Maybe you can find people who animate things creatively with drawings, but in terms of full scale, like CGI stuff, right? Other than the fan film communities, there's absolutely no point why you would specifically focus on small scale animations like that. You would have some people focusing on short films, but I just don't know of any space where you could have animators just show up, make something creative, and keep making something creative every couple of weeks because of all the issues and like the lack of things that you would be excited for. Like way back 20 years ago, you could have seen like a bajillion hexillion fucking different things like out there if you had current era technology where everybody makes their own Spider-Man, Iron Man, etc. like animations. Everyone makes their own little Kung Fury equivalent thing. But like the Western pop culture industry side of things is heavily demoralized. And the one thing that people want to focus on is anime and manga, right? So instead of CGI 3D short films, you have people just doing manga and anime and whatever. And like the dream is anime. But even that is like a very demoralized market because anime is like, they're basically the equivalent of Pixel Gypsies plus extra. Like, I think the show is called Shirobako, showing off like all the extreme nonsense that you have to deal with if you're gonna finish an anime over the course of of a couple of months, focusing on a specific deadline, and like little things happen and you have to get this thing to that thing and you have to find people last minute to figure out a specific animated sequence and whatever and so on and so forth, right? So I just don't see a future in animation where corporations can really create a home for animators and just get their shit together. Because even though I personally, if I were in charge of a small studio, would set up like a team of animators to consistently manage movies and whatever, those animators would be stuck on specific skills and I would need to worry about the budget and I would need to worry about training my people to figure out how to best manage a movie with CGI, in which case my go-to response would be just mix in practical and CGI on every movie as much as I can, do as much as you possibly can, in the camera when you're shooting it, and only correct in post when you absolutely have to. And in that case, I would be focusing on smaller projects or whatever. So big studio projects would, I just don't see a near future where CGI is good. I just don't. Like, the existing animators can create good CGI with time, but Hollywood deadlines will not allow it, and Hollywood is really, really fucked right now. So I don't think they could like afford to spend the extra time to refine the CGI past the point where it's just acceptable, you know? Like all their ideas that are already being developed are total garbage. I'm sorry, but yeah, I just don't see it. I just don't see it. Like, what do you think? Do you think big studios should set up like their own equivalent of the military industrial, complex where you have something being made in every single state, but do it with, creative people working on CGI? Or is that useless? Should they just focus on setting up shop in Japan or Korea or whatever?